Donald Trump has delivered an earth-shattering loss to the American left. The reality television star didn't just achieve a convincing win in the Electoral College, but also secured the popular vote and maintained down-ticket momentum, with Republicans capturing the Senate and possibly retaining the House as well. This kind of definitive mandate for the opposition would usually cause a political party to reflect on the policies or rhetorical strategies which led them to this devastating loss. But the Democrats are having none of that. From MSNBC to CNN to HBO, liberal pundits and politicians have been engaging in election postmortems and have come to the conclusion that the problem is not their failed platform, general hostility towards the American people, or abuse of power. No. Instead, the liberal brain trust has come to the amazing conclusion that the American people have too much free speech. A few thoughtful voices on the left have suggested that opening the border, demonizing men, ignoring the economic plight of the average American, and pushing radical gender politics onto children may have had a deleterious effect on the electoral chances of the Democratic Party. Those moderating voices have been shouted down as racist and sexist. Progressives are deeply bought into their own radical ideology and have instead laid the blame for their loss at the feet of alternative media. The left have been desperately warning about the dangers of misinformation and disinformation for years. For many decades, progressives held a near total monopoly on the elite institutions that manufacture ideological consensus in the United States. In a world where individuals are increasingly isolated from real people or events, the popular narrative delivered by news and entertainment has the ability to define reality. That's how you convince an entire nation to treat a nasty flu like the Black Death. Democrats have lived inside this reality of their own making for so long that they've forgotten that it's artificial. A fish doesn't know that it's wet. Progressives truly believe that Americans are a collection of racists, sexists, and homophobes, and if they're not fed a tightly controlled diet of carefully curated information, they'll revert to their brutal nature and start throwing Nazi salutes in honor of the eternal Trumpenreich. Leftist operatives don't see themselves as propagandists because their own reality is defined by the narrative filtered through a network of credentialed institutions. When progressives say our democracy, they really mean the consensus manufactured by quote-unquote experts that have demonstrated loyalty to their ideology. Any information that contradicts this narrative must be misinformation, not due to any conflict with reality, mind you, but because it stands in opposition to their carefully curated narrative ecosystem. In their moment of utter defeat, the Democrats have blamed podcasters like Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn, lamenting their ability to reach so many young men. Leftist pundits have expressed their need to invent their own Joe Rogan or create their own influence networks, but this is delusional on several levels. First, the left already has a vast influence network that involves the entire mainstream media, Hollywood, corporate America, academia, and unelected federal bureaucracies. But the left doesn't see this as an influence network. They see it as the baseline institutional reality. They've managed to convince themselves that the shadows they cast on the wall are reality, and anything beyond them is somehow nefarious and artificial. Second, progressives have plenty of relatively young male influencers like David Pakman and Hassan Piker. These voices have huge institutional advantages, including major funding and the simple fact that they can speak with little to no fear of censorship from big tech. But it's exactly this obvious alliance with the status quo that dooms their efforts. Liberal commentators aren't rebels speaking truth to power, they're pushing on an open door. They seem deeply disingenuous, and their audiences can feel it, which is why Pakman had to make a video recently about him losing his audience in droves. The problem the left faces isn't that it lacks media reach. Despite ominous cracks appearing in the foundation, progressives still have a definitive hold on the legacy media, education, and government bureaucracies that inform opinion inside the United States. The real problem facing Democrats is that each one of those institutions has sacrificed its credibility in the name of advancing ideology and tightening control. Soft power is always a delicate game. It requires disciplined actors to extract just enough advantage from their institutional control without embracing the temptation to nakedly advance their own interests. Progressives have lost all such discipline and burned the precious currency of institutional legitimacy for short-term gain. Now they reap the whirlwind. The left have plenty of media representation. What they no longer have is a media monopoly. Despite wielding a giant advantage in funding, prestige, and infrastructure, audiences are abandoning traditional media in droves because they simply get everything wrong. They lied about the border. They lied about the pandemic. They lied about Trump. They lied about the polls. And they even managed to delude themselves into believing Kamala Harris could win a presidential election. And even in this moment of defeat, progressive commentators sit oblivious to the reality that they've worked so passionately to wall themselves off from. Leftists are now watching the success of podcasters like Joe Rogan or platforms like Twitter and saying, "Oh wow, media can shape reality. I gotta get me some of that media," as they chat on HBO panels and write in the New York Times. The lack of self-awareness is just amazing. It's an incredible thing to behold. But Democrats can't produce a candidate capable of going on Joe Rogan, much less create an alternative to his brand of podcasting because they're so wildly out of touch and inauthentic. Rogan is far from ordinary, but he exudes an open, everyman quality that's difficult to manufacture. The podcaster is not a natural conservative, but he also doesn't hate Americans and disregard their concerns. A Democratic Party that demonizes young men and calls middle Americans trash is going to have a difficult time speaking to those demographics. And several Democratic Party operatives are starting to understand this. They're attempting to reposition in some way where they keep all their ideological commitments but change their tone slightly. That's simply not going to work. The problem is the toxic message and a willingness to just completely dismiss the concerns of average Americans, not the fact that a couple of comedians have podcasts where they don't vomit the Democratic Party line at every opportunity. Democrats had manufactured a reality where their ideology was unassailable and victory was certain. Only archaic institutions like the Electoral College and voter identification stood between progressives and the end of history. A resounding defeat in the popular vote has left Democrats baffled, wandering in the wilderness and seeking someone to blame. There will be no introspection, no lessons can be learned. Instead, leftists have doubled down on their radical policies and cynical hatred of Americans. This serves as a great reminder that no matter how smart or capable you think you are, decadence will make you weak, and insularity will make you delusional. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a great time to do so. If you'd like to get these broadcasts as podcasts, make sure to subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform, and when you do, leave a rating or a review. It really helps with the algorithm magic. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram or Twitter or Gab or Substack, if you'd like to watch these videos on Rumble or Odyssey, the links to do all of that are down below in the description. And of course, you can watch all of my episodes and read all of my columns over at The Blaze. Thank you all for watching, and as always, I'll talk to you next time.